Hello again everybody, welcome back to Rattlesnake Canyon. It's Mike here with you again as usual. Now today I'm going to start with one of the first in our series of animal introductions and animal care videos. So what I'm going to start with is the species and the snake which got me into reptile keeping in 1993, so 33 years ago now. That was when I bought my first individual snakes. Prior to that, I'd done plenty of reading and research, and you cannot beat doing that. Get as much information behind you as you can before you get into these things. So, looking at what I actually read, let me give you a talk or an introduction to the species first, the name. What we're talking about today, my first two snakes back in 1993 were royal pythons, Python regius, or in the American terminology, the ball python. Sorry guys, ball python. Now, in the UK we call them the royal python, based off their scientific name of, as I said earlier, Python regius. When I was getting into reptiles, there were very few books around. There was very little information. If you go back into the 90s, there was no internet. Well, minimal internet. And there was very little information out there on things. So everybody used books. They used their local reptile store. They found people who knew what they were talking about. They used societies. Now, we don't get many societies around these days. Some of you will know that I used to be the chairman of the West Midlands Herpetological Society. We still have occasional meetings. Who knows, there may be one this year. We haven't decided yet. Well, next year, 2026 it will be. Anyway, this was the first book which I read. Book by a lovely guy by the name of Philippe de Vosgely. I actually had the privilege of meeting Philippe at a trade show many years ago. Really nice guy. Very knowledgeable. Now this book, I've just checked on it this morning, it's a bit old. This was written in 1990 or published in 1990. That doesn't mean there's information in there that's that out of date. There's still things about tips and tricks with feeding, husbandry, temperatures, natural environments. So just because this book is old doesn't mean it needs to be forgotten about and needs to be thrown away. I've got a shelf full of books going back to when I started, right up to the present day. So that's what I started with. Great little book. It's literally, what is it? 32 pages. And as I say, 1990. So very little about morphs or anything like that. One mention of albinos potentially coming into the hobby, but no morphs available at that time. Moving forward in book terms, we come to this one, which is recognised pretty much as the go-to book, the Bible for reptile royal python keepers. The Complete Ball Python by Kevin McCurley. Those of you who don't know, Kevin McCurley owns Nerd, New England Reptile Distributors in the States, and was one of the first breeders of, or mass breeders of royal pythons. This book is, how old's this book? Let's have a quick look. This is probably, where are we? 2005. So this book itself is 20 years old. And as far as things like morph lists, it's out of date because there's new morphs created every week. So on that point of view, it's an old book. It's an out-of-date book in that respect. Husbandry-wise, breeding-wise, care-wise, feeding-wise, it's bang up to date, as well as the genetics in it. But some of the morphs are outdated now, and there's a lot more on there. So, let's introduce you to a royal python. and talk about what they are and where they come from. Come here, little dude. Now then, this fellow is the kind of snake I started with. He is a royal python. He is a normal or wild type, as we call them these days, royal python. Some people call them classics. And I think they are a classic, to be fair. I mean, look at it. Isn't that just beautiful? What more do you want? Well, judging by the availability, you want upwards of 7,000 to 8,000 different variations of this. Okay, fair enough. Enjoy them. I love these guys. So that's your royal python, your wild type royal. Where do they come from? Naturally, they're native to Northwest Africa. They're predominantly around Togo and Ghana. We do get a sub-Saharan race, which is also called the Volta, which is allegedly a lot larger and a lot more aggressive. As you can see, these guys are really, really docile. It's very unusual to get a common royal python which is snappy or bitey in any way. More than anything, they tend to shy away and curl up. So the Volta apparently is a little bit more aggressive. The ones I've had experience with haven't been that bad, but they have been a little bit more nervy. That's mostly because the majority of those still are wild caught. There's not many captive bred Voltas around. As far as royals go, when I started back in 1993, the majority of them were what we call captive farmed or wild caught. You're right, Ed. Postman. Yeah, captive farmed or wild caught. Now, that could lead to a lot of difficulties. Wild caught snakes were renowned for various health issues, ticks, mites, respiratory problems, scale rot issues, problems with acclimatization as well. A lot of them didn't settle very well, and a lot of them didn't feed very well. Royal pythons are notorious because of this as bad feeders. We'll go on to the feeding later on, but these days you get a good captive bred feeding royal and you've got a really solid snake. So this was the only kind of morph pattern variation which was available when I started. So that's what I started with. Now, as I say, they're from West Africa, Northwest Africa, naturally, with the majority having been previously imported from Ghana mainly. They will reach an adult size of between 4 and 5 foot on average. They may touch onto 6 foot, and the Voltas apparently will touch 6.5 to 7 foot. Never having kept those to adult size, I don't know on that, I can't comment. Morph wise then, we move on to the next available morph. This isn't one of the base level ones. This was the albino. This particular one is an albino pinstripe, probably with cinnamon in it as well. Parents were albino enchi pin and albino cinnamon pin. To give you an insight into costs, my normal royals when I bought them cost me around about £50, so their price hasn't really changed over the last 30 odd years. The first albinos which I saw available were around about £5,000 in dollar terms. At the time that was around about $10,000 because we were about 2 to 1 on the exchange rate. Now you're probably looking in dollar terms at about $7,500. As you'll know, albinos, I mean he's a 3 gene animal, and these guys are selling now for £175, or about what, $250. So in 35 years they've dropped dramatically. That's mainly because people wanted to breed the morphs and to get more and more morphs available. So we'll go into different types and what we've actually got in stock a little bit later on in the video. So with your royal pythons, as we say, they grow 4 to 5 foot. So what do you need to keep them in? Ideally, you'll want a 4-foot vivarium, preferably a 4 foot by 2 by 2. That's a 120 by 60 by 60 if we want it in metric terms. And then that would be heated using an overhead heat source. I tend to use something like a ceramic heater. I'll usually have a halogen bulb in there as well. And then I'll also use a UV light source. UV light is questionable with snakes and very much in debate. I've been using it for 25-30 years with things, never noticed any problems, and I do find it gives the ability to have a day and night differential, and I find that they do really well with it. So a UV light is highly recommended, and it's something which we almost insist on. Temperature wise, they want to be kept at the middle point of the vivarium at around about 30 degrees C, and that's 86 degrees in Fahrenheit. That will then give you a gradient moving down to the cool end, down to sort of 25, and to the hot end up to about 32. Nighttime, that can be dropped by 10 degrees C or so to around about 20 degrees C, and then raised up again in the day. Now, this little fellow is eating rat wieners, so we're moving on to diet now. Diet-wise, royals predominantly are rodent feeders. They will eat mice, they'll eat rats, they'll eat what we call multi-mammoth or African soft-furred rats. Multi-mammoth mice, that is, or African soft-furred rats. They will eat chicks, they'll eat birds of any sort. And I've even had some very large individuals in the past which have eaten small, I mean tiny, rabbits. So they will eat a wide variety of food. One thing we do fail to do is to give variety. I understand partly why. Royals particularly are known for being picky on their food. But I still think it's a good idea to give variation in the diet. One of the reasons for pickiness, I find particularly with my own, can be that they're fed too often. Now, my adults get fed about every 3 to 4 weeks. They'll take a small rat, or some will take a medium rat at that sort of frequency. And then at 3 to 4 weeks, they start feeding quite happily each time. Males quite commonly will go off food during the breeding season. Females will sometimes too. Females will also usually, as with a lot of snakes, go off feeding when they're gravid or pregnant. But not all of them. I've had females on various different species feeding right the way through up until the point where they're actually laying eggs. So it's not a guarantee that they'll go off, and also the fact they haven't gone off doesn't necessarily mean that they're not pregnant or gravid. Other things with housing. Ideally, royals want to be kept in a relatively humid environment, so you want to be looking at around about 60% humidity for them. Personally, I don't tend to measure humidity. I'm quite fly-by-wire in a way, and I know what my snakes need, but it is a good idea to keep an eye on the humidity. Give them a large water bowl, something big enough for them to bathe in, and that will help them when they're shedding. This little fella is actually shedding his water bowl overnight, so I'm going to deal with cleaning that out in a minute when we finish the video. Substrate wise, In the shop for the youngsters, for an ease point of view, we tend to use Lignocell. In my own collection and in our recommendations on substrate for them, we tend to go with things like cocoa chips and orchid bark, both of which hold moisture and humidity fairly well. And with both of those, particularly if you've got an albino, they're a dark coloured substrate, so your snake stands out on it really well. There are a variety of substrates that you can use, and you can even try bioactive substrates for them as well. I've not gone into bioactive in wood and Bavaria, particularly not with royals, just because they tend to be very heavy-bodied snakes and will likely damage plants or anything that you put in there. Cleaning, they'll need to be cleaned with one individual in a 4-foot viv, probably about every 6 to 8 weeks. They don't make a lot of mess. They're quite an efficient animal in that they digest their food slowly, take a good chunk of nutrition out of it, take a lot of moisture out of it, and then every 3 to 4 weeks they'll normally go to the toilet and leave you rather a large mess. So that's an albino. I think I've covered everything that we need to there. If there's anything else that you guys think I need to cover, anything that you'd like me to expand on, feel free to give me a shout, and I'll always reply to your comments or your questions in the comments. Now I'm going to move on to a few different morphs. As I say, there's about 7,000 available. We've got probably 6 or 7 at the moment, I think, but generally there's a load out there. As far as royals go, one of the questions I get from a lot of people is, should I start with a baby or an adult? Doesn't matter. Start with something that's established, feeding well and in good condition, and you'll have an animal that will live its life out with you without problems, hopefully. On average, royals live 20 years, 15 to 20. I've had animals brought into me that are 25 years old that people have needed to rehome due to moving and things. I've also had animals that are over that age. I think the oldest that we had come in was about 28. And as far as I'm aware, that one's still going. We moved it on to a friend, and as far as I'm aware, they've still got it. The books do say, some of the books say that the oldest recorded was getting into the 40s and nearly touching 50. It was a snake at, I believe it was Pennsylvania Zoo, that was in captivity over 40 years and was an adult when it was captured and brought into captivity. So there are long-term commitments. My age now, if it lives that long, it's going to outlive me. So bear that in mind when you're getting into them. As far as what to start out with, as I was saying, if you want to start out with a baby, then a lot of people do. So why not go for it? This is one of the youngest which we've got in stock at the moment. And this little fellow is a nuclear, and it's either a gravel or spark. Now, I won't go into too much detail on genetics, but gravel and spark are part of the yellow belly complex, which produce things like ivory, highway, pavement. So there's a lot in there, but gravel and spark and yellow belly are hard to distinguish from each other until you breed them to something else, which then brings it out. So this one's a nuclear. So nuclear is a combination of 2 genes, which I can't remember off the top of my head. I want to say Mojave fire or lesser fire, one or the other. But that's that one. So this little fellow is taking rat fluffs, and he's been with us now for about 4 weeks and he's eating really well. He would be an ideal choice for somebody who wanted to start out with a baby. Now, when you start out, as I say, you're looking for an adult vivarium size of around about 4x2x2. Personally, we recommend that you buy that adult enclosure size when you start out. The reason for that is that as it grows, you don't need to replace the enclosure. So let's talk about feeding. As I've mentioned, royal pythons have got quite a wide, varied diet. One thing I did forget to mention in there was gerbils. That's also something which is known to be quite a prominent part of the natural diet, apparently. So again, variation's the key. Babies, we feed on a weekly basis. So they'll be on things like mouse fluffs or rat pups to start with, and then they'll gradually move through up different sizes. Once they get to adult size of around about between 3 and 4 foot, taking large rat weaners or small rats, I tend to then drop them to being fed about every 2 weeks or so. Some need food manipulation, whether that be scenting with something like chicks to get them to eat rats, or whether it just be as simple as heating the food. If we have to heat the food, what I tend to do is put the food into a plastic bag and then put that plastic bag into a jug of warm water, generally as warm as it will come out of the tap. Leave it in there for a few minutes. This is after it's defrosted, and then once it's sort of ready to be used and sat in there for a few minutes and warmed up, we'll offer it from there. Reason for putting it inside the plastic bag is to stop the item actually getting wet. A lot of snakes don't like wet food, from what I've found. Other people will probably tell you different. So generally, if you've got a good snake and a good feeder, what we tend to do here, if we have anything which is on heated food or needs any sort of manipulation before we let it go, we try and get it off that, so that then from a customer point of view, it's a nice simple animal. Straight defrosted food, no heating, no manipulation. Is so much easier for customers, especially given that here a lot of our customers are beginners, and it just makes things easy. Also, if you've got a large collection and you've got to faff around heating one, scenting one, braining, for example, which is another thing which may need to be done, particularly with youngsters, then it just takes forever and ever to get it done. If you can just defrost a bag of 10 rats and go bang, 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 job done. That's the way you want it. So generally, everything we sell will be feeding on straight defrost food, no issues. What we do is we do offer a feeding guarantee. So all of our snakes are feeding, and we offer a backup guarantee that if it doesn't feed with you, firstly we'll talk to you about why it's not feeding. We'll go into things like, are you overhandling? Is it too noisy in the environment where it is? Is there not been enough time to let it settle? Now, most snakes will say to let them settle for a week or so, maybe 2 weeks without any handling, as in excessive handling. What I call management handling, which is where you've got to move them to change water bowls, maybe to change substrate, that's acceptable. But taming handling, where you're holding the snake for 15, 20 minutes, half an hour at a time, we tend to recommend against that for the first 2 weeks or so. For royals, we tend to double that and say give them at least 4 weeks without any excess handling. This allows them to settle and become used to the environment that they're in. As long as they're feeding and settled, then you can look at starting the handling process. Should they stop feeding once you've started that handling process, then it may be an issue that particular animal doesn't like being handled too much and may need a little bit more time to settle in and get used to being handled again. So what we normally do is stop your handling, let it settle, and then keep trying with the feeding. Only once a week, don't over try. One big problem that people do as well is they'll keep trying every 2 or 3 days. If it doesn't feed Monday, they'll try it on Wednesday, and that doesn't help. That actually stresses your snake more. Give it time to settle. Once it is settled and feeding, normally royals won't be a massive issue unless there's a problem within either the environment or the excess handling, as I say. Again, we're always here to try and talk you through any issues, and even to the point where a couple of years down the line, I've had people bring things back into me that have been off food for 8-10 weeks. We've brought them back in from them, had them here for a few weeks, got them settled and feeding again, and they've gone back home. Not to come back again, fortunately. So it does work. We are always here as a backup. But the main thing when you're choosing a royal is to look at the condition of it, make sure it's nice and healthy, make sure it's feeding. Ideally, make sure you've got a feeding record with it, or at least that whoever you buy it from tells you exactly what it's eating, what they're doing, whether there's anything specific, whether they are heating it or manipulating it in any way. One thing I've only been asked a few times, and I actually appreciate when I get asked this: can we see it feed? Now, obviously we feed on certain days, but if you say to me, I'm interested in this, can I come and see it eating and see what you do? By all means you can. All I'll say is we may have to arrange a day, especially if you come in the day after it's been fed. I'll say to you, right, we'll come in next week, or we'll give you a day. But yeah, come and see us feed it. You can see for yourself that it's eating, and you can buy that in confidence. So that's that bit for you. What I'm going to do now, show you another couple of the morphs that we've got. I've got some really lovely snakes at the moment, and I've got one where I left the door open before I started this video. I did notice he's decided he's going to make himself a bid for freedom. Only a little bit, but most of the time royals are really, really sedentary and lazy. This little fellow, come here, yeah, has decided he wants to go for a wander. Actually, it's a she. This came from a breeder down in Wales. Lovely guy and great breeder, quality animals. I will be having more of him when I've got space to take more, promise. But this is a Enchi Spectre Bongo. Now, all three of those genes probably don't mean a lot to people, and unless you're going to breed from it, it doesn't mean anything at all. What it does mean is you've got a beautiful snake. Now, from my point of view, my recommendation would be, people say, what should I keep? And I always say this with anything: keep what you want. Okay? Don't buy a particular morph or two morphs because you can breed a certain other morph out of that pairing, unless you want to produce it for yourself. One thing which I always wanted to produce, having seen them many years ago, was what they call a killer clown or a super pastel clown. I'll show you some clown stuff in a minute. 3 years ago, I actually produced 3 killer clowns, and they were stunning animals. I know where they all went, and I've also got a buyback clause as such with them, so that if ever the people who had them get rid, I will have them back. Killer clowns is just my favourite morph. I'll pop a picture into the video somewhere so that you can see what I'm talking about. But yeah, that one Enchi Spectre Bongo. This is a 2024 animal, so it's just over a year old, and he's around about, what would we say, 2.5 foot. He's eating rat wieners quite happily. Sorry, she is eating rat wieners quite happily. So let's pop you back in there. And I'm closing you up this time because I don't want you getting out again. So one thing I will do, going from viv to viv and animal to animal, right, what you saw me doing just before I cut off was alcohol gel between getting different snakes out. So we now move to this one. This is a pretty much adult female, and she is a pastel morph. Pastels were one of the early morphs as well. They are one of what we call the base morphs. They are a codominant, so that means that there is actually a super version. So if you breed pastel to pastel, you'll get the super pastel, which is what we put into the clown genetics as well to get the killer clown. And pastels are, as you can see, a very yellowy snake. They're very enhanced on the yellow, and they do that with whatever you pair them to. So this little girl, say little girl, she's quite a big girl. She's around about 4 years old, and that is at roughly what I would say is ideal breeding age. Personally, I don't go with weights. I look at the condition of the animal, and I look at the age of the animal. Don't breed them before they're about 4 years old. And in all honesty, with the current market, lay off breeding for a bit. There's too many royals around at the moment, and the market is very, very flat and depressed. Prices are dropping through the floor. So let's just keep them in and enjoy them for now. As I was saying earlier, morph wise, keep what you want. Don't buy with the intention of producing to breed, or with the intention of breeding to produce something, unless you really want to breed something specific. But as I say, at the moment the market is terrible. But there we go. So that's a pastel. We've got a few of these girls in. She's currently not for sale because she's paired up at the minute, and she's in with this fellow, and he is a clown. In fact, he's a pastel clown. Now, pastel clowns are lovely. If we're lucky and she turns out to be het clown, which she may be because we've had various hets in the past, then we will get some killer clowns from her. I've seen these pair locking up recently. This time of year, which is November, is typical breeding season for royals. So they start late October through November and December, and then you'll usually get babies or eggs late February, early March. Not always. I've had eggs laid. In fact, one of my breeders has got eggs cooking at the moment, which have been incubating for about 4 weeks now. So they can be very late. Breeder many years ago told me that you can find that females have their own season, so it doesn't matter what you try and manipulate, they will breed when they want to breed. So again, this male is not for sale at the moment. As I say, he's a pastel clown. So if we get the super pastel clown, that will bring out the yellow even more, and produce a really stunning animal. Now, as you'll see, he's not much difference in size to that female. One thing that people say about royals generally is that males are a lot smaller. They're not, in my experience, certainly from a length point of view. They do tend to be a bit more slender, but overall they're very, very... Okay, size-wise then, there doesn't tend to be a massive difference between males and females. Going back to housing and the sizes we recommend, as I said earlier, a 4x2x2 is what we would recommend as a nice size housing for them. A lot of people will say, oh, they don't need that 2 foot in height. Now, royals will climb, and there's been several reports of adult males particularly being found high up in trees. So give them the opportunity. 2 foot of height from the floor, which they're not actually going to use the whole 2 foot, they're probably only going to use 18 inches of it. That's not high. Walk around your local park, look at where the bushes are. Okay, so at 18 inches, that's most likely below your knee level. That's not high, that's not arboreal. You don't need to be an arboreal or climbing snake to use that height. So just bear that in mind. They will use it. So I've got one more left for you. A bit more hand gel between different ones. Yeah, I've got one last one for today. This little fellow came into us on Saturday. And these are one of the more desired morphs in a way. He's a banana, and he's a banana enchi. I would also say, possibly looking at him, that he may be a pastel as well. What you'll see with bananas, you can see possibly there's the odd little bits of black speckling on them. The reason I say this one may be pastel as well is because those black speckles are much more pale, they're more brown than black. And he's exhibiting typical American named for them ball behaviour. That's their typical defensive behaviour. So when they feel threatened, they curl themselves into a ball, stick their head in the middle of it and go, you can't get me. And they won't come out of that until they feel nice and secure again. The others you've seen, they're used to being handled, they're used to me handling them, moving them around, and they're quite calm and relaxed with handling. This one, maybe not used to being handled that much, but also because he's only just come in, he's a little bit unsettled. So he does tend to go into semi-defensive mode or semi-nervous mode. So, but that's a banana enchi. Okay guys, I hope I've covered everything for you there. If you have any further questions, anything you want to know, as always, pop them into the comments and I'll reply as soon as I see them. There will be plenty of new videos in this kind of series, partly to promote the stock that we've got available, but also to give some husbandry information. Now, one thing I will say, there are lots of ways of keeping things. Many, many ways. Just because it's the way that I do it doesn't mean it's right and the only way. It's what I've done for 30 odd years, but I also adapt it. As things are developing and we're learning new things, I'll upgrade my husbandry and we'll change different things. But don't just discount everybody else's information because of what I say. No one person is spot on and accurate. Do your own research. These days it's very easy to look into natural areas to get natural habitat information. You can go online and you can get weather data for 24 hours a day of a particular area in Go. So yeah, you can find anything and everything that you need to know about your animal easily these days, or about your animal's natural environment. Look into it, research the natural environment, and recreate it as best as you can. The size that we recommend, the 4 foot by 2 by 2, gives plenty of room for enrichment, whether that be branches for climbing, artificial plants for hiding, deep substrate for burrowing. Do it. Make it better for them. Thanks guys, thanks for watching. Anything you're interested in, any questions, anything I can help with, drop a comment in the or drop a question in the comments. Give me a like, give me a share, do all the usual YouTube jazz. It's easy for me to say, or not. And I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.